I'm ready to go.
There you go. Okay. These are all on. Okay. Very good.
I do anywhere.
Okay, the questions that were just sent in I saw right before I left, so we'll try to get to some of them. We still have some from last Bein Hazmanim, so we're going to begin with a Shailos, which has a lot of hashkafa to it also, and then go to some of the halachas that came up in the last few weeks, and then we'll have some more hashkafa toward the end. So if your Shailos doesn't come up, it's never a bracha l'vatala. We have it in the folder, and I think over the last 5 years we got to most of them. There are a couple that would take over the entire hour of the shiur. So if you sent it in and you see it's repeatedly not there, see me privately. So either we skipped it because it'll take too long, or it's too sensitive to record, or both. So if you did send it in, you shouldn't think that it was being ignored. Okay, let's begin with something that's a real sugya in Bamitzia and other Masechtas, and a real Shailah Apidin that comes up that people don't realize there are chiyuvim here. There's also an important hashkafa behind it, how not to get yourself into this issue or mess in the first place. So let me read the 3 Shailas that are related, that are sent in, and then we'll go one by one. When one loans his friend money, does he need a shtar or edim? Now, you're familiar, that is a Beferish Gemara. Rabbi trying to bring it down halacha. There's a slew of tshuvas and achreinim to discuss to miyasha the meaning why people aren't doing this. It comes up in yeshiva all the time. It should still come up. People still have cash. Everybody's using their parents' plastic. There's still cash around. It used to be, believe it or not, you could buy something for a few quarters, and $1, $5. And there are people who occasionally borrow money. There are people habitually borrowing money, which gets into the ashkaf of not healthy for their lifestyle, not in gashmias and something not ruchnias, and we'll get back to that. Do you need a shtar? So the Gemara says you do, and the Gemara says nothing to do with your shamayim and frumkeit. It has to do with the fact that people forget. Then they forget, and then sometimes they're going to be kaifer akol, they're say lahadam, they're going to be mishtamet, the mixes, all the sugis come up. You would think for $1, $5, $10, how much mishtamet they're going to do, but you'd be surprised. They don't have it on them, and they borrowed from 8 different people, and then sometimes they actually forgot, delude themselves into thinking that they really didn't borrow it. And Gemara says that it's a shayla lifnei iver, because as soon as you don't use a shtar, it's a pella. How Rashi seems to learn like this, that he already has in mind that I have a way to get away with it when he asks me for it, because he doesn't have proof. Mamash kafi type, he's handing him $5, and he's already thinking at that time he has a way to get out of it. It's a fleeting thought, but it's possible. And Lamaisa Apidin, you need a shtar. The yishuv is that either people are meichel, or it was only said as a hiddur, as a chumrah. No, it's a gemara. So even if it says a hiddur as a chumrah, so it means you're not being over on a din mamish of lifnei iver. It's certainly a good thing to do. You don't need an official shtar with a certain nusach. You don't even need 2 edim. You can have ksav yada as long as it's legible. And your other option is, if you don't want to start getting a paper and a pen every time somebody comes to you in the hallway or in the dorm or in the dira for $1, $5, $10, you could tell him with a straight face and look serious. Otherwise, he's certainly not going to plan on paying you back. You tell him, I want this money back, and we really should write a shtar. I don't have time, you don't have time. And I'm meichel b'leiv shalom if chalila you forget or don't have the money, or try to be mishtamet because Yetzer Hara got you, or whatever the case may be, I'm meichel, but that's only if you don't pay me back, because I don't want to be causing a michshol that you should have to come back as a cat or a dog or a parrot or something like that, and that's not the makar of the isser. The isser is you got to pay back, and the chiv is you got to pay back. People get more scared by the gogulums. That's why I just mentioned it. But lamaisa, you tell them you want it back, but if lamaisa you don't pay it back, going to be meichel. Good people won't take advantage of that. Some people will. Some people think in the back of their mind you really wanted to give them a gift all along. Whatever their rationalization is, lamaisa. After hearing that, you're probably saying it's kedai to get a pen and a piece of paper, which it is, because why shouldn't you get your money back? And the din is you're not supposed to loan it without that. So that's question number one. Question number two is the Rabbi Shailos. If you're borrowing a chefsa, he says here a water bottle, is a Rabbi's issue. There is an issue to loan something so b'so. Is a sugi is an ezer neshech, and the gzeira is that commodities, whatever you're borrowing, bottle of water, they go up in price. They can go down also, but they go up. And then when you give it back, you're giving them something of greater value. It's machzik ribis. So it's officially usher. That's not well known. Is there any heter there? Again, the kula is between good friends and neighbors, is that if it's something that doesn't have a big shavius in the first place, and people are really meichel, it happens all the time. You borrow, or you're running a house, you borrow eggs from a neighbor, you borrow grape juice. So you borrow 3/4 of a bottle, you have it toward the bottom, you want to pay back a whole bottle. You're already paying back more value even though grape juice didn't go up. So if there's a heter, some kind of the heter is, if it's a very small amount, people aren't makbid. Very hard thing to figure out, very dangerous, because no one's going to admit to being makbid on getting back slightly less grape juice than they loan. So no one's going to say, yes, I'm makbid, it looks ridiculous. But that doesn't really mean that the mecha b'leiv shalom, and it's a ribba shayla, not a mechila shayla. It could be a geneva shayla if you told them you get back the same amount, but it's a ribba shayla, and you can peg the amount. Say the water bottle is, how much is the bottle? A water bottle? Just one? Or nobody buys them one at a time. Give me a price. What are we up to now? How much?
It's free over here.
A water bottle is free, or a water fountain? Is it free? There's no sub aside. That's free. Free, as in zero.
Yeah.
Boy, I should come here more often. Free, okay, and they don't run out? I guess no one's going to take advantage. So, yeah, so now you have like a svek. It's a suffix whether it went up, and even if this lumber did, I can go to Shainer's and get it for free. That's not a great, I'll think about that one. That's an interesting, I know that's news to me, but okay. L'maisa, there is, l'chatchila, the sugya says it's beferish, and you could peg it to a certain dollar amount, or think of some other possibility. But there is initially a gzeira of sabasa, and there are again a number of ways to solve it. The last part is, and this is often when it's a sizable amount, and with Bochurim even a non-sizable amount. People are makbid on their dollar bills and their $5 bills and their credit cards, which probably not theirs anyways. They certainly should be makbid. So, if you become a tremendous Baal Chesed on your parents' cheshbon, that's another shayla. Some people are just very bright with their credit cards, and they're sure the parents would love the schus of getting everybody a Coke, every Leil Mishmar, and a few donuts, and so that's a shayla of kibbut avim, a shayla geneva. Again, within reason, it's assumed. I mentioned that because after tomorrow, some of you might be for a few days on various trips, and the shaila comes up afterwards. Sometimes mitzad the parents, and sometimes mitzad. And if a parent asks me, "Am I mechuyev to make good on a credit card that was spent after I give my own son musar, but he paid for his friends? Am I mechuyev to stand by it or not?" You don't want to get into such a shaila, and you might have a level of generosity that if it's not your credit card, the owner might not have, and treating everybody else is not so pashut. So if you're making such plans, try to figure that out beforehand. Now you want the money back. So the final shaila is, are you allowed to ask the loiva for the money back or remind him? There's an issa deraisa of losia kanesha, and if he doesn't have the money, you know he doesn't have the money, then it's usher to ask for it back. If he has some of the money, you can ask for a partial payment. He owes you $20. He's going to say, I don't have the money. He might mean, I don't have all the money. You can ask for 10, you can ask for 1. Every little bit helps. You could ask him misafek, They say Safed Reis L'Chumra, but it doesn't apply over here. If you have a real reason to believe that he might have the money, then you're allowed to ask. If you're pretty sure that they don't, then you can't ask. Don't means, in general, not that he doesn't have it in his pocket. You have a right to ask him. He's going to say, I don't have it. He might mean, I don't have it on me. You can say, okay, you don't have it on you. You're going home tonight. Can you bring some? Or can you go back to the dorm? Can you have access to it? There's the massage on the Baal Chayv, which we don't really do today for sizable amounts. The Umas Olam don't do it. The Sternbach is a tshuva. So why is you look at the whole Sugya Masajin and you haven't learned it? We take everything he owns and you force him to sell the house and you leave him X amount for him, not even his family, and he loses his house, he loses the furniture except for a table, a chair. If he's a wood chopper, you leave him a chainsaw, and that's it. Nobody does that today. Why is that? The answer is the Goyim aren't as makbid. It's going to look cruel, not even though Pidin you're allowed to do it. The sugya has an arichas on how much you're allowed to take and when and what do you leave them with. That's not going to be an issue nowadays. People want their $5, $10, $20, $30, $100, and it's your chiyuv to pay them back in a timely fashion, not that they'd have to nudge you. There's a separate isser of telling a guy lech v'shav, by schiras pelim certainly, but even by loaning money, it's an avla. And there's a chiyuv to be forthcoming and tell him when it's coming and do partial if you can. And misafik, he's allowed to ask you for it unless he knows vaday that you don't have it. The hashkafa behind this is that there are people who are constantly borrowing money and they're doing it in a way which becomes unhealthy, because what starts off as $1, $5, $10, $20 becomes a habit. And one of the things you have to learn earlier on in life from the Gashmiistic point of view is not to have such hasagas and try to manage a budget, because there are people who grow up and can't manage a budget. Life is expensive. It's not always their fault, but sometimes it's just lack of training. And al pi hashkafa, the fact that every market feeds on kinnis, not kinnis seifrim over here, just kinna, and everybody wants what everybody else has, is an old human issue. But if you feed into it and start doing things and have habits that can't be supported, in Ruchnias that's going to be a big problem. You're going to run into Yisurim, you're going to run into Machlekasim, and you're going to run into a lot of Bittul Torah that you're running around trying to satisfy things. Over Yontif, a Bacher made the mistake. It wasn't a mistake, he actually knew what he was getting himself into, but made the mistake of asking me if I can quickly chazer over the smoking a Yontif issue. It's not a Hechsher Stempel on the smoking that we spoke about previously. And he knows that it's Yontif, he can't do any vaping if it's electric or battery, whatever, and besides the chametz and kidney issues. He just wanted to know smoking, so he said, I have a follow-up, Shaila, that's why I'm asking. I said, you remember what we said, the smoking on Yontif, B'zman Hazeh, is very shver, is based on a Pnei Yeshua, the original heta, that it was healthy, and no normal person can claim today it's healthy. There are people still claiming that it's very unhealthy, but it's good for my digestion. I'm not sure what to do with that. If it, Rahman al-Islam, wreaks havoc in the rest of the body, and you think that the digestion is going better, Pnei Yeshua was a long time ago. He said that it was known to aid digestion and it was generally healthy. The Surgeon General won't find out for a couple hundred years that it's dangerous. The whole heta was to make a shav b'chol nefesh. Anything done l'rafua is shav l'chol nefesh. If it's not l'rafua, then you're back to ein shav l'chol nefesh, and it's far less, I'm happy to report, than 50% of the population. I've had Bochurim argue on that statistic, and they're wrong. We don't look at your group of 4 friends. One told me, he said, no, it's 75%. I said, how do you know? He says, I know. I said, okay. I assumed he was looking at a very small group of people, and even within his yeshiva, it's not 75%. Baruch Hashem. So it's not shav b'chol nefesh. The only tzad really was the fact that it's healthy, which is a very difficult argument to make. So then he tells me, he says, okay, that was the Chazara. He thinks he remembered something like that. And so I said, you remember? I said, it's really not a good thing to do. He said, no, he remembered that I said that not everybody answered it. I said, people remember what they want to remember. After chazing over the whole thing of Pnei Yeshua, I said, it's very shver, the svara is hard to come. Okay. So you remember that? I said, so what's your Shaila now? He said, I want to know, is there anything wrong with rolling cigarettes? I said, rolling cigarettes? I learn a lot from these Shailas as I go Bein Hazmanim to Bein Hazmanim. Rolling cigarettes? I said, what are you rolling in there? I was afraid to ask. So he said, no, tobacco. I said, okay, Baruch Hashem. I said, why are you rolling it? So he starts telling me, he says, certainly since the tariffs, you know how much a thing of cigarettes costs? So I said, I don't know how much it costs. How much does it cost? Nobody here knows either. I'm getting a bunch of blank faces. But he said it's like $18. So I mentioned it to him, it's Yontif, I don't want to start a whole financial discussion, but it's part of this shmooze. I said, $18 is a lot of money. You have money like that? He said, no. I said, your parents are supporting this habit? That's again Evas Das, keep it of Aim Shaila. They have a right to ask you not to do things that are unhealthy. One of the questions coming up is that strict kibbud of aim? It's not macheo, mashkeo, not direct kibbud. I said, but they certainly have a right to their own credit card. That's their money. That's not part of that. That's push-it. So he said, yeah, I know, and I'm trying to get better at this. I said, so what are you doing? He said, I'm borrowing it. I said, that's great. And you're borrowing it? The money, you just pay $18. The $18 is going up in smoke, literally. So what are you going to do now? He said, there are a lot of people to borrow from. I don't know which part of this conversation was worse. I said, how are you going to pay back eventually? He said, I have good friends. You know what that means in English? They're going to be Michael. Not a mahalach in life. Especially to feed a habit like this. Especially on Yontif. He's not buying him on Yontif. So, I mentioned before Yontif, in a different context, that part of the feeding of this general hashkafas Chaim, which is not good and not healthy, is the fact that if you look at what the country is doing in general, America particularly is bad at this, more than most countries, is they also have habits of spending a lot of money, and they're spending and spending and spending. And without giving you a very deep economics lesson over here, it is quite a fascinating sugya with a lot of nafkaminas in halacha and hashkafa, but one point to bring across. So some of you might have heard recently it's a big debate and it's getting worse and worse. The country, as wealthy as this country looks, is actually pretty seriously in debt. It's never been worse. You say, how bad can it be? You can't even think of these numbers. Anybody know what the number is? More than $20. They're buying a lot of cigarettes. Most of it's actually spent on things that blow up and not cigarettes. It's the defense budget is in the trillions. As of a few weeks ago, I don't check these things very often, $36 trillion in debt. $36 trillion. I didn't repeat this to this bocha, but then he'd say, okay, so for my $20, it's not going to make a difference. There's a big chilik over here. There's a country. And then there are individuals. For individuals to live like that is something from lifestyle where it's all about managing the gashmias, having some of it, but managing it and keeping it on a low burner, as low as you can, so you can pursue your ruchnias. And there's an inverse relationship. We all know, everybody loves quoting the Yerushalmi that you go to the Elam Emes and you have to say that you enjoyed all the gashmias. We know, and we also know the Mesilas Hasharm, who has a very different shot in what that means. But we're having gashmias. The question is how much and what habits are we creating and what level and what lifestyle. And you hear $36 trillion with a T. Now, if you're not familiar with how many millions go into a billion, how many billions go into a trillion, it's a lot of money. How do you become $36 trillion in debt? So, you shouldn't get any ideas from this because humans who are private individuals can't do this. America can, for the meanwhile. The shaila is, you know what the formula is? I don't want to dwell on this, but it's a fascinating topic. How they do it? Obviously, they're borrowing money. No, printing money is not the vert. The printed money is about maybe 10% of the circulation of the money. That's what I started with today. The printed money is going out of style. They want to discontinue the pennies for a while, the nickels, the dimes, the dollar bills. Everybody's swiping plastic and zelling and all sorts of things. And 10% is the printed money, and it's going to get less and less. It's a $36 trillion. How do you run up a bill like that? And it's getting worse. The pella is, it used to be a Democrat spent all the money. Now, some of the Republicans want to lift the debt ceiling and get rid of it. I mean, they want to just be totally no gedarm, nothing. Otherwise, you got to go through Congress and have a whole fight every time you want to lift the debt ceiling. So they want to get rid of it for different reasons. There's an important hashkaf over there. Maybe remind me next Bein Hazmanim. Maybe by that time the national debt will be 100 trillion. Well, we might have to go back to it. But it's not healthy for them either necessarily, but for individuals you can't do it. So why is the country doing it? So they have, for now, for the last 100 plus years, they have seemingly a limitless amount of people who are willing to buy the national debt. It's considered the safest investment in the world. It's called treasury bills and treasury notes. And it's an open market, and they sell billions of dollars every day, and they keep raising money. It's an amazing system. And the appetite, they just keep, it's a safe investment, they pay interest, and whenever they want to raise another $1 billion every hour, they just sell treasury bills. So I know you're all thinking, why can't I do that? We'll start a chevra, and we'll sell. The answer is, yeah, you can start a corporation and sell corporate bonds, but you got to be somebody to do that. It's not a mahalach for life, it's a question whether it's mahalach for governments, but it causes a tremendous amount of damage for individuals. Because it just keeps pushing it down, and there's no self-control. And these Shailos are great Shailos. If you do have to borrow money once in a while, what's with the ribbis and the sabasa? And how do I get the money back if I loaned it? It's a nice thing, and you can buy your friends, and you can loan money once in a while, be nice about it, but understand that the system in general is not a healthy system, and it leads to a lot of bittul Torah and a lot of gashmias and taivas, and it needs to be controlled. So that's, for now, nobody should go home worrying about the $36 trillion. That seems to be under control for now. Nobody looks here too worried. I'm not sure why. Translates into X amount of debt per citizen. That's all of you. And if it gets out of control with what they're worried about, it's going to become a big problem for everybody. Right now, Kosh Baruch is always running the world, and they seem to be able to raise the money. But that's for a different day. The next question. One's family still has Chol Stam. Should they try not to? And what about Yashan? So, I must have touched upon some of this years back. Yashan as a sugya is much more chamer than Chol Stam. Those who were being Samech HaRameshon, I'll be Samech HaRameshon. Moshe himself says a Ben Terah, Bal Nefesh should be Machmer. If you live in Monsey, or any from community that has a lot of things on the shelf, there's Kemat no Nisayan. Like anything that's, if you're labeling it as a chumrah, it's not all or nothing, and there's still some people who say that they need product X, and that's their whole gashmias, and that's Chol Stam. Okay. Lamaisa, it's never been easier, and the shaila is appearing less and less. If the family is still not with that program, certainly don't machlekes, and most parents who are sending Bochurim to Yeshivas will have nachas when they're taking on hidurim, which are not that difficult at all, and there won't be a machlekes. If there is, you have to ask a personal shaila. The Yashan, the good news is, as we stand here right now, you could take on the chumrah. It's very easy now. That's why I didn't bring this up Sukkot. This is still from before. Sukkot, it's going into the winter, is, if you're not used to it, it's not hard because it's come out between now and 10 years ago. It's different, a day and night. It's come out every bakery and every Hamish operation with a Shkocha Pratis and Hamish product. The national organizations are not promising Yashan, even though they're helping out a lot in sourcing all the ingredients because they have access to the big companies. They're not here to give a hashkacha for people only a makbid and Yashan. But again, if you live here in Monsey and Brooklyn, Lakewood, and all the other places that have availability, it's never been easier, and you have to almost go out of your way to have Chodesh. After Pesach, needless to say, it's mutter till they start shipping the new stuff in August. That gives you till next Bein Hazmanim. If you want to hear more about it, when you send in the Shailos for the pre-Elul shmooze, we'll maybe touch upon it. Lamaitza, it's never been easier, and the Shaila over there in the debate is an Issa D'Oraisa, not a Din D'Rabbanan. So if you compare the two, Yashan is a lot more chamer. Chal V'Yisrael is important and very easy to do. somebody's taking one, not the other, that's a difficult shayla. Pashtas Yoshan would win, but it's not exclusive, and you want to be with people who have these hidurim, because there's still plenty of Gashmias to go in Yoshan and Chol Yisrael. And again, now and 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's the exception rather than the rule that a company that's serving the frum public is not Yoshan and Chol Yisrael now. So it's not going to cause Pashas Machlekes. If it does, obviously you have to be very careful. On the same note to the Kibbut Ava Aim, so the question would get somebody nervous, but it's important to address. They want to know, Lamaisa, if the parent is asking you to do something or not do something that is not directly under Kibbut, which is servicing them, Machel, Mashkeo, the examples of the Gemara, helping them out, doing errands for them, cleaning for Pesach, helping them out. That's direct Kibbut. And they want to know if the parents just have requests to do or not do other things, assuming they ask their own shaylas, is it mutter to disobey them? And this is a big sugya, and there are many who hold that it's not under kibbut, it's under yira, which means it's a lack of yira to disregard their wishes when they're asking you something normal. Sometimes the children don't think it's within the realm of what everybody's doing, but quite often they're wrong. And even they might say that for a little bit. If their sheet is a hold, it's on the Yiras Aveim, which is the Reisa, that's Kedai to do. Some hold it's not on the Kibbut officially or on the Yira. L'maisa, the problem is, so he wants to know, is there something to be Semichan? Problem is, when you get into lying and stretching the truth and being mishtamit, you're going to have a big problem. So evenly it says, not on the cover directly, it's not on the Yira, which is a machlekes, why get into a Shailah with the Reisa? You're going to end up being asked, like, what'd you do? Where were you? Are you doing this? And it gets them upset. Nobody wants to. There are enough things going on in this innocent life. Nobody wants to go to Shamayim and find out that they were Mitzvah the parents, and technically there was a Patur, it's not in the covenant year, they're Mitzvah the parents. And if not, then you're going to try to hide it. You're going to get into lying, and we all know, if you haven't found out yet, when you start lying, you end up lying more. And it never ends well. It always blows up, and it's a horrible habit. Medrash Tirchak, it says Tirchak is one of the only places in Chumash, besides it being a bona fide Isser, which many Pesachim say it is. Tirchak means it's habitual, and you get into it, and it's not healthy. So, halacha l'maisa, I don't advise it. Technically, is it under Yira? Is l'maisa machlekes achronim? A very simple shayla, which I said over this morning in 2 minutes, and I won't take much longer now, but comes up a lot of a yantif, and it's important to know what to do, and a lot of people find it a chiddush. They're not sure why they didn't know it was a shayla in Hilchos Shabbos. It comes up every Shabbos and every yantif. They don't know the history, because certainly when there's a kula around, sometimes it has wings, and they don't realize how serious the shayla is. What am I referring to? So if I realized I didn't get back to the shayla, by the way, of that bacher of rolling that thing, and it's not negayah to anybody. So just in terms of Shabbos and Yantif, I asked him right away. I never saw anybody do this. I said, how do you get it to stick together? Like, isn't it going to fall apart? He said, no, there's a sticky adhesive, like an envelope, with saliva. So I said, that's shayla. He wants to close it and take a mana on. He said, no, I didn't want to do it anyway. It's a chametz shayla. I said, I think the other shayla is a little worse than the possibility of the chametz, but that was the shayla he was leading to. That, Baruch Hashem, never heard the shayla before. I hope I don't hear it too much going forward. But again, if somebody has a shayla, they should not be afraid to have shaylas. What's the most common shayla that happens at your table on Shabbos and Yantif when they're serving regular food, drink? Maybe you know what you are doing already or not doing, so you don't even think it's a shayla. What's the most common shayla that comes up at the table? Anybody? Lashon hara? No, I'm not talking about the conversation. What?
Opening cans?
Opening bottles. So opening cans, interesting you said it that way. Opening cans we don't do. Come out all the peskim. If you were doing it, you don't have to bring a carbon chatas. We saw Yaakov Fisher as a dayan the bedats held it was mutter, but we don't open cans. So I'm glad you phrased it that way. You just did it for the Habatz's Torah Shabbai. Cans, like the real cans, the soda cans, like with the Papa, yeah. So we don't open cans. We try not to open up cans, Shabbos and Yantif. If you have a family minig dafka, they followed the miyat of the peskim who held it was mutter, so you have what to be samechan. The plastic, not the metal caps, the plastic caps on soda, bottles and the plastic on water bottles and on seltzer bottles is a Shailos. More of a Shailos than people realize. There are many Pesachim out of Yemazeh who hold it's Asur. You got to break that seal. You hear noise when you open it up, and you're creating a Kli. Many are Mako based on Shlomo Zalman. Just the history is important. Shlomo Zalman looked at this, thought about this when it first came out a few decades ago for like a year or two. The Shtalshel Sadran, when he first saw it, somebody brought it to him at a Kiddush. He saw it, he's so interesting, and he thought about it, and he developed it. Might say it came out that he thinks it's mutter. The chilik between the metal and the plastic, if there is a chilik, is that if you know how they make the metal, it's a flat metal piece. It goes by the machine actually presses down hard and makes it over the bottle, and the first time you opened it up, it's now a functioning metal cap where the dotted line is now expanded. So your mamish made a kli. So by metal, it's a real shaylo of the reisa. The plastic, I saw it myself, is an entire plastic cap ready to go, and it just forces it on. So yes, you're still widening it. That's the din. Is that making it clear or not? There are many pesachim where mappa is not well known. It's like somebody doesn't open up plastic, so most of the tamiyah. Might be more pesachim that aser than mater, but if you're relying on Shlomo Zalman's maskana, even though he had to think about it for a while, then fine. Is there a shayla on yantiv? That was no gay the last 7 days. Is it more mutter on yantiv? Is it pashut mutter on yantiv? So the short answer to that is there's not a big chilik between yantiv and Shabbos. Our Moshe has a tshuva where he develops two possibilities of a chiddush. He says himself, he's mesupik. He says maybe if it's mamish, the kli you're taking it out of, it's not like machshir yachal nefesh, you're making a kli, a can opener to do something. Machshirim is the step before. Maybe it's yachal nefesh mamish. He says that wouldn't help if it's water because the Ramah holds you're supposed to do it before yantiv, even yachal nefesh mamish. Chaber holds it's mutter legamre. The Ramah holds you should cook beforehand. Say there were a lot of guests and there were 100 bottles of water and you couldn't and you didn't get to it. You could do it with a shino. What a shino would be over here. His other side is it's machshire. You're opening up a thing, and on the side you're making a klif. You hold this asr on Shabbos, then it would be asr over here. Machshire chanefesh. Gotta be careful with this. We really pass like a Yehuda, but it's halacha vein merin kain, which is very rare. Halacha vein merin kain means the din is you can do it, but don't tell anybody. Which means I shouldn't be saying this barabim, certainly not in a video, and the very other things. So Rav Moshe says that even though it's halacha vein merin kain, so why is he writing in the tshuva? He says he thinks that this wouldn't apply over here because the only reason they made a lachavei American, which is a very unusual category, is because it's something that people can confuse. Something broke, and now you think you can fix it, and next time you'll wait to Yantiv to fix it. You could have fixed it before Yantiv. Here, by definition, the minhag is to open up bottles when you are ready to consume them, and therefore maybe there's no halachavei American. That's a very quick review. If you learn the sugya, if you didn't, you should learn the sugyas. Sugyas on Yantiv are important, but according to both of these studim, it's not so l'chatchila. If you can make a chilik, the chilik would be possibly between seltzer and water. Seltzer loses its fizz. Water, you open it before yantiv, takes 5 minutes, open up all the bottles. Doesn't lose anything, there's nothing to lose. The seltzer, if you open it and close it quickly, probably won't lose much fizz either. It's the question about whether it would apply to seltzer, but that's where the discussion starts. And again, if no one and around the table is even aware of this, it's kedai to bring up, don't attack anybody, but it's a shayla on Shabbos, and Yantiv people think it's completely hutra, it's still a shayla, and this comes up at every single Yantiv table. So it's kedai to chazer and just know what the family minhag is going to be. Okay, last one from the old ones, we'll get to a couple of the new ones. Somebody wanted to know, this is the first time nobody sent in a shayla. Is there any heter to daven after this man? We finally settled that problem. No, we're getting somewhere. Nobody sent in the shayla. There must be, everybody knows. Even though it comes up in this context. So somebody at my table wanted to know what the heter is to eat the afikaim after chatzais. We made chatzais by at least a minute, sometimes 2 minutes. We did not make challah, which is the chumrah of the Ramah. But we made chatzais with some effort. As you all know, the Mechaber and the Ramah, even more Machmer, we see the Lashon in Tafayin Zayin, Lachar, Gemara Kol Asuda, Eichlin, Matzah Shmur, Tazam Matzah Gazayas, Kol Echad, Zechel Pesach, Hanech Al Seiva, V'yachlena B'Seiva, V'levarchala, V'yezahir, V'yezahir, be medayik in the Lashon over here. V'yezahir means be very careful. It doesn't say it's Asr, it doesn't say it's a Chiyuv. which is where the discussion starts. But it does say, V'yezar la'achloi kaidem chatzos, and the Ramah adds, try if you can to eat the afikomen, bench, and say Hallel before chatzos as well, which some people manage to do, which is obviously harder. So this person wanted to know, a fair question, a lot of people do not make chatzos, and some people don't even try. Like, is there a yishuv on that? It was good to be miyashiv the minig. So I told him that the mechaber is clear, you should try to make chatzos. The Ramah is even more clear. However, the Be'er Halacha reminds you, there's a machlokes Rabbi Elazar and Azariah and Rabbi Kiva, how long you have for achilas carbon pesach. Rabbi Kiva says the whole night, midaraisa, and Rabbi Elazar and Azariah says till chatzos. Afikomen is zeicha lekarban pesach. So they patterned it after whatever the carbon pesach is, and that would mean you have to eat by chatzos. Why do we paskin? Who should we paskin like? Machlokes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Elazar and Azariah? No. What's the psak if you don't know any better? Obviously, whatever you say after Rishonim are going to argue. But what would your starting point be? No? What? Rabbi Kiva. Why? Halacha Rabbi Kiva mechaver, right? So half the Rishonim hold we pass like Rabbi Kiva. You have the whole night. Be'er Halacha at the end says it doesn't really help that much, perhaps because midarbanan you have to eat it by chatzos. The answer to that would be this is a zeichel davar, not the machmer the drabanan. According to Rabbi Elazar and Azariah, have to finish by chatzos. Why should we pass on Rabbi Elazar and Azariah? Because a number of stam mishnayos that seem to indicate like Rabbi Elazar and Azariah, so maybe it's an exception to the rule. But that's the machlokes rishonim. So over here, you have a matzav where there's already a machlokes, and somebody who is being mekel has something to be samech on, and there were achronim that said that if it's too difficult, there's room to be mekel. They say it over the name of Sam Sefer, doesn't have a tshuva on it, but written by Talmidim who knew what was going on. So you got to be careful whenever you have Gedel Achronim who's quoting what, but in a good Likud Sefer. And there's even a shmur that the Netziv, who is known to have a seder that went till the morning because that's part of the din to have a seder and talk and learning about the Inyan the whole night. So even the Netziv, that's a chiddush. L'maisa, the standard psak is that you should make an attempt, a strong attempt to finish for chatzos. During the discussion, the person who's asking kept on pushing, and he said, well, Machaber says beferish. I said, yes, and you should try to do it, and no one's undoing that. The Yezer is a very strong lashon. So he brought it out. He said, well, what's this and that and davening after the Zman? I said, well, there are two different sugis over here. Davening after the Zman, there is no Rishon on the planet, then or now, who says you're l'chatchila allowed to daven after the Zman. It doesn't exist. It existed, and even this was a big machlokes, if you're doing 4 hours of achana, and you just can't get up any earlier, 3 in the morning. I have reason to believe that somebody getting into the Shailah might not be doing 4 hours of achana, maybe not even an hour, maybe not even 4 minutes. So even the Mekilim, who, and it was a big machlokes 150 years ago, that's a well-known machlokes, Chaim Voloshin wrote a sefer on it. Okay, that's a well-known machlokes, not Nagea. That's the whole heter. This is very different. So you'll have larger percentage of people, I'm not pushing it, I try to finish and we're successful, come out all the years. L'maisa, it's not a mahal to start up for no good reason when the Machaber says v'yezayir. But there's a big chiluk between that and davening bizman. I mentioned that I mentioned at the beginning of Bein Hazmanim in Shul. We can't have a matzav. Don't attack anybody, and you can be makayim haftadecha kamecha and all the other good mitzvahs and ma'aser they're doing. It can't become a matzav l'chatchila where somebody who is being meser nefesh to daven at 9:30, that's mesiras nefesh already, that's still in the zman, is looked at as a machmir, and the baseline din becomes in the collective minds of people that it's somehow mutar l'chatchila to set up your schedule like that and daven after the zman. There is no shita like that. It doesn't exist. People are shocked to hear it. So here we managed to put it in, even though nobody sent it in as a shayla. I'm just contrasting it. If you have to choose your kulas, eat the afikomen after chatzos. I'm not pushing the agenda, but there's more to be samech on. And the only reason I'm bringing it up, even though nobody sent it in, because a few of the parents mentioned to me that they want to know. They came to me, the Rosh, are they missing something? I said, what's the Shaila? He said, I don't know, it seems to be, unlike 5 years ago, 10 years, it seems to be l'chatchila, like Ein Petzah Peh Mitzatzev. Nobody's even mentioning, by the way, this is very b'di'evet, and the Birchas Kriya Shema is a Shaila, but it's a Brachal Vatola, it's an old Shaila, after the Zman Tefillah before Chatzos. I said, forget all that. There's no shita that holds the chatchili dam. The shita came from the achanas of many hours of avodah and kedusha, which is normally not what's fueling this now. So he said, well, if you'd land from Mars, he tells me, I wouldn't get that impression. I said, you're right, and I don't have a defense. That is not to attack any individual, certainly any institution, certainly the fine institution that's being Marbitz Torah right now. It's not necessarily their setup. It's the Shiloh of what the people are gathering to do. It just can't be a new Messiah that within the Zman is a new Hidr, a new Chumrah for somebody who's very Yeshivish or very Litvish. Nothing to do with anything. So that part is a mitzvah farsim without attacking anybody. And by Chatzos, if you're by your parents or Shver or Zayda, and they're going after Chatzos, that's where the Shaila came up. They were at my Seder. We made Chatzos by a minute, but we made it. And last year he was somewhere else, and he said, should I mention something? I said, sorry to be such a makel, but no. You have keep it of aim, you have your grandparents. If that wasn't the Messiah, then don't bring it up. You can mention that, by the way, last year somewhere else, and it's doable, this and that. If they want to do it, then wonderful. And it's good to be with the Mechaber and the Ramah. But that's very different than the Shaila of Tefillah. Okay, that's not going to come up next Bein Hazmanim, so at least we covered it. Somebody just sent this in, again, right before I came. I'm not sure on the Metzias, I'll just mention it, and if the person can either yell out from the floor here or tell me afterwards what the Metzias is. But he quotes a very, very large corporation in Eretz Yisrael that sells millions of dollars of chametz. I'm not going to mention the names, I'm not sure where the Metzias came from. He says, how can they sell it if their insurance policy won't cover the goyim who they're selling it to? So what he's asking is, if that's true, it's a good shaila. He says, obviously there's no Gemira's das, because if the insurance won't cover it, no one's going to take such a risk. So whoever sent in the shaila, I'd like to know where they got this piece of information from. I can't speak for the insurance companies. I would understand insurance companies like denying claims, and that's how they stay afloat. But it's understandable if an insurance company would say, we insured you, it's under his ownership, we didn't insure them. If they want to be difficult, Lamaisa, we don't change the property is still there, the security is still there, whatever we got under the insurance policy is all there. Why would they be obstinate? So it's quite an allegation. If it's true, then it's taka good shaila. So whoever sent that in, if they can see me afterwards, I think there is a possibility the insurance would cover it. Of course, if they cover it after a lawsuit, sometimes you have to do that to pressure them to cover it, which is fine. They're allowed to defend themselves, and they say that it's not you in the policy, and they say, nah, that was just a mechira, just for religious purposes. That's a problem. And that came up already in the time of the Chaim Sefer, where they told the government, somebody was malshin, that they weren't paying sales tax, and there's millions of dollars or kopecks of things being sold before their holiday, and they're not paying sales tax. And they were summoned to the government, and they gave that answer. They said, nah, it's just a religious thing, which created a storm. And all the tshuvas, they said, that's a bad answer. Because they're saying it's not a sale, we don't pay sales tax. So it ends up, at least in that neck of the woods, Franz Yosef was a nice guy, as emperors go, as ruthless tyrants go. And he said, I'm meichel the tax, I know it's causing a problem, it's a real sale, we're choosing not to put sales tax on it. So, Shailos, what is the insurance company saying? Interesting Shaila, but I'd like to know what the Metzias is. There are two more Pesach Shailos in here. One is about the garbage bags. There is a chilik between, let's say, Lakewood and Muncie. When you put out your garbage in your garbage bin, just so you'll know for next year, in Muncie, as far as I know, where we live, just north of here, we own the garbage bins. That's our kli, it's our rishus, and we own it. And if you put it out there, and unless you were pagam it, unless you did something very serious to pagam all the garbage through and through, it's sitting in your kli. I believe in Lakewood they have a thing where they sort of lease it, or it's somewhat owned by the municipality. You have to check out in each county how that works. So then if it's theirs, then it's not my reshus, certainly if I push it off the immediate property. So this bracha wants to know, why is it mutter even if it's not my bin? Let's say I'm taking out, putting it in the street, it's in my garbage bag, why is my kli kaina? The answer to that is that your kli is not kaina because you're putting out the garbage bag with the garbage and you're mafka everything. And that is not an issue whatsoever, and that was always the minig, certainly Brooklyn places like this with a lot of put it out, that you're mafkrit and that hefker works. Just an interesting marmokum, a number of people this year forgot to do something Shabbos morning. Anybody remember what it was? Now that you might remember you forgot to do it, what? They call chamiras. That's the number one. A number of people asked it. For every 5 people that asked it, another 10 people didn't want to ask. So the good news is, just the lump to see is important. You'll check this out during the Zman. Most people ate the chametz they owned. There was a couple of bags worth, and they said to call chamira on leil b'tikas chametz. There is a ketzais, and the Yeshivas is chaylik on this a lot. There's a ketzais by the sugi yishol madas that holds that if it's the muchach and you say something, it might go l'marfreya. So there might be some value to saying that even at that point, even though shtei dvarim ena b'reshus shel adam and the Torah put it in your reshus, but you have no right to be mafker it if it's mitam hefker, and can you be mafker on Shabbos? So, just for the lumpness of it, if you get to those sugyas, look for a ketzais. It's a very interesting rate on that.
The garbage bag you have to have.
It's garbage bag what?
You have to have of Shailos.
It's mochuch. You take garbage and you fill it with garbage. We finicky Americans wouldn't go near the thing, and we don't want to know from it, and it's way on the curb, and that's very hefker. And it's again not in your bin. In your bins, but you put it aside. It's good to do it, and if you're saying kol chamir, you're doing that. Shayla, you'll have be mafkar on Shabbos or not. So Shayla, is ever an isser? We'll make it over here, but it's an under the mucha that you're mafkar it. Okay, one more. I'm leaving you with 2 kashas. The ketzais you have to find yourself, and it's quite an interesting application of the sugya. Somebody wanted to know how there could be any shita, and there are shitas, that aleisa shachar and Rabbeinu Tam is a set 72 minutes. If it's pretty clear l'chayr from the sugya, from the Messiahs, that it depends on where you are on the globe, latitude, longitude. And whoever asked the shaila, I'm not going to address it now, we have no time and we have a lot to get to, but it's an excellent shaila. I have been looking for a long time, and I have one sefer at home that's over 1,000 pages. The sefer is written just on this shaila, and after 1,000 pages, I don't think he answered the question. But nice try, a lot of schar. But I still think the strongest right. I'm not saying it's not a machlokes, and you don't have to understand everything, but you have to try to understand. To say that 72 minutes is a hilik minig because that's an average, and that's what they kept, and that's what my Zayda did, that's wonderful, and you should do that. To say that it doesn't change, and lahachmer or lahakol, based on the metzias around the globe, it's very difficult to justify it, and I haven't seen the teretz yet. Adarab, whoever asked the shayla, if you find the teretz throughout the year, please let me know. Just I'm saving you time. If you want to buy that one sefer that's over 1,000 pages, I got to the end already, and I still didn't see an answer, but maybe somebody's working on another one. I'm sure there is a teretz. I'm not trying to make chayzik. The shita exists. The shayla is how it stems with the sugya. One of the surprising things that we should think about and can be missed in the Seder, it's only X amount of time in the evening, either till Chatzais or till the morning. If I were to ask you who is the biggest Adam Russia, who's the biggest villain of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, of everything we're learning about, you know it's a trick question already, so you're not going to say the obvious answer, but if you wouldn't know that I'm asking the question, give me a name. Is one name that comes to mind? Begins with a pay. That should be easy. No? Okay, you had somebody else in mind? Okay. Yeah, so it's not that Pella is, it's not a machlokes. Okay. You would think it's Paro. Yeah, but it says Beferish. Say Lamad, Mabikesh Lavan Aram Allah says Yaakavinu. Pyro was only Geyser. We're not trying to make Pyro look good, and that's the Shaila. Why this contrast? But Pyro Geyser is Chaim. If there no Chaim, Klai is going to fall apart. So why is there a chilik? We're not going to address that now. Lavan Bikesh Laker is a kol. So it's one paragraph, but the worst person that we discuss, and Chazal pointing this out for a reason, is Lavan. Why is that? So If you look, this is, we would say in the expressions we use today, say this is very under the radar, what we're going to discuss, but it's extremely important, and it shouldn't be nogea, but it is. We have to know how to protect ourselves. The Rambam, when he brings this down, has an interesting lashon. Sternbuch points this out, and you almost don't notice it, and it's interesting how he learns this Rambam, but there's certainly a possibility. There's no extra word in the Rambam, as we know. Rambam spells out Maschilin Beganai, that's Terach. And then, if you want to look this up afterwards, Perek Zayin Halacha Daled in Chamis Hamatzah. V'chein Maschil Madia Sha'avoda Me'in L'Par Mitzrayim Chalarosh Shagamanu Masayim Benisim B'fol Shas Lanu Chayriseinu V'hu She'yidrish Me'arami Ovid Avi, which is the parsha by Bochurim. Arami Ovid Avi is Lavan. Ad Shigma Kol Parsha V'chol Mois V'mar B'drash Parsha Zu Areza Meshubuch. So you could say, Drash Parsha Zu is the whole parsha about the Shibud and the Chayris. Shemach is medayik that Lamaisa, the parsha does start with Arami Ovid Avi, and it seems to be there's something we have to know about Lavan specifically that has to be brought up at the Seder afterwards, and you have to come out of Pesach with it. So what is that? L'chayr the Pashup Pshat is that Lavan was more dangerous than everybody else because Paro wore whatever you picture a Haman wearing. But as a three-cornered hat's a different story. People stop confuse that with George Washington. There's no shaykhah to anything. And whatever you picture a Russia looking like, what did Lavan look like? He looked like a nice Zaidi who pretended to want what's good for the family, and he had tainas, and you're taking away my children, and I only want that they're good, and he gives a whole long drasha. And Lavan, Kishma Kachi, whitewashed everything, and he pretended to be a pretty decent fellow. And Yaakov Avinu, Baruch Hashem, understood quite well that's what made him more dangerous. So you remember at the end of Parsh Vayetze, as Yaakov Avinu ran without telling him because he didn't want any more shaykhs, he didn't want the family to have any more shaykhs, so Lavan runs after him, catches up with him, he's warned by Kadosh Baruch Hu not to start up, and Lavan says, I could have done this, I could have done that. He's still talking with Gaiva, and he says, let's at least make a deal, we'll make a treaty, we're not going to start up with each other. Like all treaties we make with Sani Yisrael, we keep our side and they don't keep theirs. Bilam, who was Lavan, his grandson of Gilgal, came afterwards, crushed his foot in this monument of Avanim because the Malach tried to remind him, and he didn't want to be reminded. The pasuk over there at the end of the 8th say, and they start building it. Yaakov Avinu said, make a little more shalom, okay, but we're leaving after this. Heavy lifting, literally, with rocks. They're making a large pile. And Rashi over here says, Le'echav is his children. Good keep it of aim. Idea to keep in mind that you're here not only to be mechabed and give nachas, you're here to help parents and give them chizik. So Rashi says over here, Echav is Banav Shila'achim Nigashem Elav L'tzar L'Machama. They're right behind Yaakov there, helping Yaakov Avinu stay away from Lavan and protect him, and they're building this thing so they can get done with it and leave. The pasuk then goes on to say that after they had it built, Lavan again gives a drasha, and he says, remember, we put this up, and I'm not going to come and harm you, even though he will. And then he puts in his kfira. This is the nice, from-looking fellow, Elokei Avram ve'Elohei Nochar. So he slips in. So I believe in Hashem, I believe in Elokei Avram, and Elokei Nochar a little bit in the mix. Tries to slip it in. That was his whole purpose. Yishbetu Banenu, Elohei Avihem, mixes them both together. V'yishava Yaakov b'pachat of Yitzchak. Yaakov Avinu says, no, I'm making a shvua with the one and only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Parsha ends, V'yizbar Yaakov zeva bahar v'yikra la'echav lechal lechem v'yechal lechem v'yelina bahar. Again, calls Echav, and they sit down and they have a meal. So Rashi over here says Echav is la'oyevav shem Lavan, Lavan's family. Rabbi Yaakov points out, he obviously, Rashi changes from Echav within the same parak to mean two completely different things. So Rabbi Yaakov asks, how did he know that? And the answer is, he's not inviting his children, who are the Enikloch of Lavan, to this Suda. Before you use this in real time with family dynamics, ask a Shaila. But Lamaisa, you see how toxic he understood it was, that if we ran for a reason, and we we're looking like we're going to his das, and he had tainas. The man's dangerous because he's basically suggesting that you could be very Jewish and we can have traditions and we can be one happy family. Just don't be too focused. Everything should be Yiddishkeit light. And unfortunately, there are people, and they don't know it themselves sometimes, there are people and agendas and things being said over and being framed in certain ways that are, if you dig down even a little bit and you're aware of it, are completely the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing in terms of our Yeshivas and our direction as B'nai Torah and as from people who are supposed to be trying to build the Yiras Shamayim. And not just the Gashmias over the top, which we spoke about at the beginning. It's the fact that things are being passed on as not so bad, and it's yesh for yesh, and it's a free country, we're very happy and wonderful, and we have the freedom if they let us do what we want. Freedom doesn't mean taking in every kruma hashkafa and bending and watering down and serving everything light. That's what Lovin stood for. And Baruch Hashem, everybody I'm speaking to now is going back into the Zman, and the ones who are not going back into yeshiva, I have a funny feeling your parents and a lot of other people and sisters listen to this as well. So the sites they don't have to look up. But Lamaisa, this is where the battle is. It used to be a battle where they were saying outright kfira every day, so you knew who the enemy was. Today, a lot of times the people repeating such things or doing certain things don't realize where it's coming from and don't realize how harmful it is, and it's seeping in slowly but surely, and the people who know better often are doing it with an agenda to just let in a little bit at a time and still act like the very concerned grandfather as Lovin was, but Lamaisa it's Bikesh, Lovin, Lakas, Akol. So it's a pella of all the horrible things going on in the Haggadah and all the Shibudim and all the Ben Ayara Tashlachu. And Chazal highlight the most dangerous thing was Bikesh, Lovin, Lakas, Akol, because if you give a little bit, it just gets, the piercing gets wider and wider. Going into Hazman, you have to know that in the best of places, there's always going to be madregas of various types of people with different shifas. Hopefully everybody's working on themselves. We try to be everybody's friend to keep shalom, but as we all know in life, not everybody's your best friend and not everybody's your chavusa. You have to have lines drawn on what you're going to listen to, what you're going to talk about, what you're going to agree to. Sometimes just listening and smiling and not being meicha doesn't mean you have to be going around like a kanoi looking for machos. It does mean, though, that especially nowadays, certain things come up, and sometimes they're kaddish v'tar. You don't even realize how bad it was. The fact that it's even havamina, the fact that it's being discussed. And if you do know, you have to be able to shut it down and end the conversation, because we're talking about changes in Messiah. Slowly, Rahman al-Islam, slowly but surely. And most of the people, hopefully, I'm looking at are Kedoshim v'Taharim and don't even know half the things, and they should stay that way. But understand we're in uncharted territory, because Skala a couple hundred years ago, they didn't mince words and they just said, we're out of here, and they started asking kashas on everything, which is a little bit easier to handle. It wasn't easy, but easier because, okay, you're coming here to get rid of Yiddishkeites and we're not interested, except for the people due to the hardships and persecutions who were. But we're not talking to them right now. We're talking to Unzer Mention who are with the program. So the new tactic is just let it seep in slowly and just say it once, say it twice, let it be chal. Wasn't any big explosion, so it's okay. People are okay with it and inch your way forward. That's Begeder, Bikesh, Lovam, Lakas, Akol, because that was his tactic. And Lamaisa, we need incentives. Well, Gashmias is okay. Everybody needs a Chevra Shaf. Everybody needs the Chizik. The Shaila is in your new matzah, your old matzah, but every Zman is new. What are you choosing to be with in terms of which matzah, which type of growing chabur? You can't grow in everything, and no one's perfect, and you shouldn't look down on them. Lamaisa, by the chavusa tumult, or if you took care of that in the end of the Zman, hopefully you chose well and you had siyat deshmaya. You have to look at it at the beginning of the Zman, you got to look at it in the middle of the Zman. where you're holding, what the conversation is, in the Dira, what the conversation is, by the Suda, what the conversation, sometimes Nebuch and the Beis Medrash shouldn't be a conversation, and is something seeping in? Is this growing on people? And again, without getting into Machalikisim, you don't have to get into Machas have different levels, and sometimes not an open Macha, it's just like moving away. I don't have to listen to this, I'm not sure that it's completely Krum. You could ask a Shaila, I'm not sure it's completely Krum is completely Krum, and I'm not sure it's good for my Ruchnias. Often the last question you can answer yourself. If it's not a positive thing for you, then you should be trying to upgrade, and the more you upgrade, the less of a pool there be of the people who want to push these agendas, and then everybody will be forced to grow. And that can be done most of the time b'shalom, and sometimes b'shalom afterwards, but we have to be on the lookout for the Bikesh Lavan, and it could show up even in the Heichal HaYeshiva, it could show up in a shul, it could show up in the street in front of the yeshiva, in front of the shul, and we have to be careful, we have to be able to at least, it's good to be simple and not complicated. It's not good to be a complete Pesi that you don't even know that what was just mentioned without anybody noticing was something that just downgraded everybody's Yeshivas. That's important to keep in mind for the new Zman. And Mitzvah Hashem, before Elul, will try to put a little bit more into that, but the Musa Shmuz before a summer Zman is not the same as before Elul, although it probably should be. Because you have a whole Zman ahead of you, and Mitzvah Hashem, everybody will steig, and everybody will steig without anything polluting the atmosphere in between. Okay.